Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Confessions of an Autism Mom. So, this week I do not have a mom, but I do have a special education teacher. Her name is Morgan, and Morgan works with our babies. So, even though it's Confessions of an Autism Mom, I am trying to make the podcast where I speak to everyone that has an experience with autism or with a kid or brother, sister, friend, anything pertaining to autism, because everybody viewpoints matter, and that's what it's about in the community. How are you today, Morgan?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and I'm glad to have you here this evening. So let's go ahead and hop right on into today's episode. I want you to start off by telling me like what tailored you into wanting to be a special education teacher and also becoming a full-time BCBA.
For sure. So I kind of always knew I wanted to go into teaching from when I was a little kid. It started pretty early on. My uncle was actually born with lissencephaly, which means smooth brain. So I remember being a kindergartner, kind of teaching him his numbers and letters while I was learning mine. And my parents knew right then and there that I was going to be a teacher. So that experience kind of stuck with me a lot. And then as I kind of started to work more in the fields, I even did like a high school teaching program. I kind of realized that I liked working more with kids with special needs. So that's kind of how I got into behavior analysis.
Okay, perfect. And I know we spoke about it. How much longer do you have on your program?
I have about a year left. I'm a full-time special education teacher, so I'm working on my coursework on the side.
And what's your experience like being a special education teacher?
I love it. Every day is completely different, and I think that's one of my favorite parts about it. All of my kids are working on different goals, different concepts, and I really kind of get to differentiate every day what I do with the kids, so it makes the learning fun.
Okay. And with this man autism channel, podcast, well, whatever you're watching, YouTube or listening on Spotify, um, how do you deal with your kids on the spectrum, and how many kids on the spectrum do you have in your class?
About 14 throughout the whole school year. I specialize in math. So when I work with the kids, we do lots of whole group. We break out into small groups every day and we use lots of visuals. I feel like having those visuals really helps my students learn.
You've created SheShapesBehavior. Can you explain that to me and what you offer and what do you want us parents to get from it?
Sure. So I actually started SheShapesBehavior only a couple of months ago. So the following has grown pretty fast, but my main goal with SheShapesBehavior was to kind of spread more awareness about what ABA really is, and how you can use it in so many different disciplines. So I want to educate grad students, parents, caregivers, ABA professionals, and how to use ABA in both the home setting, the school setting, all of that good stuff.
We know like ABA is a very, very controversial topic on social media. And I am pro ABA therapy because it has helped my son so much.
I love that.
From your personal experience in like your classes that you're taking and the program that you're going through, can you explain what ABA is and how it's beneficial to our babies?
For sure. So ABA is basically just the science of understanding behavior, understanding why people do what they do. So when we learn in our ABA coursework, we focus a lot on ethics. So that kind of, I think, clears up a lot of the complicated history that ABA has. I think a lot of people think that ABA is about compliance or control, but we're actually trying to build kiddos' independence, and kind of increase that connection to let them live more independent lives.
Okay. And so I have done my research on ABA because, like I say, I'm looking at it and I'm like, why do y'all make such a big deal about it? But when I looked it up, I was like, okay, I get it. Why is it important for people to be more open and understanding that times have changed when it comes to ABA therapy back then versus now?
I think it's really like any field, honestly. I think a lot of fields have advanced with technology and things like that too. I think there's just more studies being put out there, especially about girls on the spectrum as well. I think we just have a lot more information now, so we're able to make better decisions.
Okay. So with ABA therapy, and this is off topic really quick because I just thought about it. With ABA therapy, I get a lot of comments of like dog training. That's what people say to me when I'm speaking for ABA therapy. Because I can admit, when I was in the parents group, I was one of the people like, oh, let me see what they're saying about ABA therapy. And for a second, I was like, okay, I'm not going to put him in ABA because I was, listening to the comments, but it's actually more beneficial to us and it helped. What do you say to people that call it dog training?
It breaks my heart when people call it dog training, but I understand when that's the perspective, parents see on social media. Of course, you're going to try and relate to other people's experiences and see what they have to say. But I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying about compliance. I think people think it is like dog training and we're just wanting to get the child to do what we want them to do. But we're actually supposed to be doing a lot of more like student-led neurodiversity-affirming stuff with our practices.
What you learned through your program, how do you use it with your kids in the classroom that's on the spectrum?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I like to do with my kids, I like to show them how I use ABA in the classroom. They hear the word ABA brought up a lot. One thing that I like to do are reward charts for each month. So I'll do something fun, something like relatable for the kids. So last month we did popsicles for our last month of school.
Okay.
And so they had to earn a stripe on their popsicle every single week for classroom behavior. And we kind of talked about, positive behaviors and negative behaviors, different things that we want to see in the classroom. And the students actually went up and kind of were actively participating, writing down things that are good, things that are bad. And then when they would get to color in a stripe, it was really reinforcing for them. We also do like token boards in our classroom. So each of the kids have their own token board and they kind of have a little list of rules that they're expected to follow. And if they follow those throughout the whole class period, they get a token. So
Okay.
that's to kind of reinforce that behavior and they get to earn a reward at the end of the week if they have all 5 of their stars.
Okay. I love to hear that. Because Aiden used the token system as well. His is by the day versus like the week. Studying, being in your program, not studying, but being in your program, do you think ABA affects the kids like on a negative term or a more positive term? Because I even hear parents that say, oh, my kids are in ABA, it is play based, but I can see them becoming a different kid. How do you feel about that? Or, what have you learned about that so far?
Yeah, I think when ABA is done right, it can honestly just be truly beneficial. I think if it's used too much or too consistently, if it's being overused, then I think there can be kind of negative effects to it. Because if your child isn't in the clinical setting, he could also be around, other children that are demonstrating other behaviors that maybe you don't want your child to start seeing. So I think it really just depends on the environment and kind of communicating with your BCBA to see how much support your kiddo needs.
Okay. Another question that I always see going around, do you think every kid that's on the spectrum requires ABA? Because sometimes I look at ABA as a treatment and it doesn't work for everybody and it's okay. Like, how do you feel about that?
For sure. I kind of agree with you. I think that not every child needs it. I work with a couple of kiddos on the spectrum that don't actually get any ABA support. They're in more of the resource classroom setting. So I definitely don't think it's needed for everyone, but I have seen people use it for so many different things. I've worked with kids from 3 years old to 21 that are on the spectrum. Some go for more like toilet training, things like that. Others do more like social skills training. We work out in the environment. We go to the grocery store. We go to the pool. So I think it really just depends on what your child
Morgan, so let's talk about IEPs for a moment. With you being in special education, do all of the kids in there require an IEP?
Yes and no. So I have some students. So the level that I teach at, I teach in Illinois. So the level I teach is called instructional. So there are kids that are kind of just below the general education setting. So they all do have IEPs, but there are some students in a level above called resource that don't have IEPs.
Okay. And is it true, because I recently heard this, just because they have autism, that doesn't require an IEP? How does that work in Chicago or Illinois?
Um, that's actually a good question. I'm not actually sure about that one. It really
Okay.
depends on like the state and the area, honestly.
Okay.
All the students that I work with that have autism have IEPs.
Okay, perfect. And how involved should a parent be when it comes to an IEP? Because I know a lot of people are like, well, I just did what the teacher said or just listened in the meeting. How important is that for us to really get in and get our request approved?
So important. And that's why I really want to start doing consults with parents on Find Parent Advocates, because I want parents to kind of know their rights and kind of know the things that they can advocate for their child. There's lots of services, OT, PT, things like that, that they can kind of help get their child that support. And I think that that can be really life changing, especially when they're so young too. So I think it really is important for parents to be active and kind of know more about the whole process.
Okay. And what's the misconception about IEPs that you hear often or you may deal with often?
Well, as a special ed teacher this year, I worked both with special ed students and with some gen ed students. So I would kind of push into gen ed classrooms where I had some special education students that I was helping out. And I think the biggest misconception is that having an IEP is kind of like a silver spoon. I think people just think that it like completely like ups that student's game and like makes everything so much easier for them, when it's really just about kind of leveling the playing fields for gen ed and special ed students. So I think I would say that's the biggest misconception. I think in a whole IEP really just is kind of a ladder to get the child to kind of where they need to be, get them that support.
Gotcha. And I'm about to ask this question that you mentioned that, and I'm not controversial, but I kind of think outside of the box when it comes to my son being on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about kids on the spectrum being in a Gen X class? And hear me out. I know a lot of times parents are like, oh, we want inclusion and we want this, and our kids should be a part of the regular class. But in actuality, I personally feel it's safer for our kids to maybe not be with the kids that are not on the spectrum or be in their own little space where they're comfortable and don't have to be put in a position of being stared at or bullied or anything. How do you feel about that?
I love that you brought this topic up because I hear about it a lot. I kind of agree with you. I think it really depends on the level of needs that the child has. We also have to think about safety too, things like that. But I personally really like working just with my special ed students in a special education classroom, because I feel like I'm able to really kind of tailor my instruction and kind of like my assignments and things to fit their needs. Every day, all of my students have a different assignment. It looks completely different. So things are really personalized to them. And I feel like that's the way that I see the most success. But I also see where parents want their child to be, like every child, feel normal, feel included. So I think maybe a balance would be good. I think for the core subjects, like when I teach math or when my co-teacher teaches ELA, I think that those would be really good to have in like a special education classroom, but maybe do some of like the specials, like the PE or music, things like that, more in a gen ed setting, so your kiddos are still getting that exposure.
Yeah, and that's my thing, because I'm like, I can see them going to lunch together, having that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Going, like, for the younger babies, going to the playground when they go outside for play, like doing things like that together. But I personally want my baby in a separate room, and not just because of bullying, but I know when my son gets into his little zone, he has his little quirks of things that he do. And I don't want him to distract others, but I don't want people to also be like, oh, that's a target to bully him,
Yeah. You want to
So
protect him, you want to support him. You're doing all the right things, Mama.
Thank you. So back to IEPs. What advice do you give to parents when it comes to IEPs? What's the biggest, like most important thing?
I think the one thing I really like to go over with them are kind of their child's goals. When we have the IEP meeting, I spend a lot of time talking about kind of data. I'll bring samples and things like that so they can kind of see some of their child's progress. And I think just looking at those, the parents are able to kind of feel a little bit reaffirmed that the goals that I'm setting for their kiddos are the proper goals. Just so that they kind of know what we're going to be working on the whole next school year, because the IEP runs through the whole school year.
Okay. And you say for the whole school year for the goals. What
Mhm.
if like half of the year you're like, okay, they're not making any progress in these goals? Is it okay for a parent to come in and say, hey, I don't think this is working. Can we redo the
Absolutely.
IEP? Is that possible?
Absolutely. And a good special education teacher will also be taking data on that consistently. Every week in my classroom, we're taking data on our goals so that we can kind of see the progress we're making. If I feel like we're kind of at a standstill, we're not going anywhere, I would totally amend the IEP, change the goals so that we can make it something that our kiddo can reach.
We talked via email. You talked about how you are an advocate for parents that for their self-care for people that are on this journey. Can you explain to me like how that became so important for you to advocate for?
For sure. So I think the main reason, honestly, I reached out to you was because I love how you kind of promote and you kind of spread awareness for moms of kiddos on the spectrum. I just kind of wanted parents to know that, like, we as ABA professionals really see them. And we know that you guys do so much, and it's okay to kind of feel exhausted at times. I think you think as a parent that you have to be so go, 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 and you're always trying to find resources for your child. But you're a person as well. And I think that that's really important for parents to know. Um, what else?
And thank you for noticing that. I wanted to do something more so for parents because of, like you say, we're always looking for resources. We're always just on go. I find myself a lot of times always on go, and I
Mhm.
have to take my 5 or 10 minutes. But it really sometimes upsets me when I see parents say, "Oh, I don't have 5 minutes," or "I
Mhm.
don't have this." So coming from someone that is in the field, that's very important for you to recognize that the students that are on the spectrum, how do
Mhm.
you make their parents feel seen and heard?
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to do is have consistent communication with my parents. So whether that's, sharing good news about a test that their student took, or we made progress on a goal, or just telling them little things like that throughout the day, I feel like parents, especially like kid that have kiddos on the spectrum, are so nervous to get phone calls because they think it's going to be something bad. So I like to kind of buffer that and show them that there are some really great things that their kiddos are doing. Pieces of advice I've been given recently that I think could help some parents is when you're on an airplane, this is kind of an example, but when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put your mask on before you put on anyone else's mask to help them, I think you, like, parents have to kind of take note that they have to take care of themselves too before they can give their full effort to their kiddos.
Yes, and that's very important. And like I say, I appreciate you as a professional noticing that because sometimes our BCBA is wonderful, but I hear other stories and I'm like,
Mhm.
my BCBA would I call her ours.
Yeah.
Like she would never like, and how she checks on me personally means so much to me. So I can tell that you're going to do an amazing job when it comes to parents because she's like, when I get out of the car and if I look tired, she's like, what's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And she'll tell me to vent to her and we'll have like a 30-minute conversation
Mm-hmm.
in the morning. And I think that's what I love the most about her. And it's very important to have that because sometimes I work for Marcus Autism Center, and a lot of times parents think that it's strictly business. And I talk to them, and I'm like, "No, I'm here for you. Like, what do you need? You know, we
Yep.
have your back." And I noticed that with a lot of the professionals at Marcus, like they really care for the parents, but a lot of people don't get to experience that. So I'm glad that you're here to be able to tell us that.
Yeah.
Um, how do you manage personally, like after work? Because it's a lot on you all as well. You all
Yes.
take licks. Sometimes the ones that are verbal, they have no filter. Like, how do
Mhm.
you manage?
Yes. Well, burnout is very real. I think that goes for parents. I think that goes for ABA professionals, special ed teachers, really anyone kind of in this field. I think I kind of know that I'm getting burnt out when things I usually get excited about or I'm starting to kind of dread a little bit and be like, I just don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
But I feel like when that happens, I kind of just pause for a minute and I try to go do something, even if it's for a few hours, just to kind of fill my cup up a little bit.
Yeah.
So I like to kind of maybe watch like a TV show, hang out with like my loved ones, my family, or just kind of go grab a coffee, just something to kind of break up the chaos a little bit.
That's good. And I like to be with my friends and family too. Like, that's my relief.
Mhm.
So, with you being a special education teacher and then you're finishing up your program, what route are you going to take? Are you going to stay within the school system, or are you going to focus on SheShapesBehaviors?
I'm hoping to grow independently in the
Okay.
future. I have a really great mentor. Her name is Christina. She's at ABA Made Easy on Instagram. And she's kind of just taught me a lot on kind of, she's really mentored me on how to kind of maybe in the future start my own independent practice. But
Okay.
I'd really like to focus more on like parent training. I really want to work one on one with parents because I feel like a lot of times in the clinics, I worked as an RBT, and a lot of times in the clinics, like kiddos would make a lot of progress, but then parents were having a hard time seeing that progress at home. So I kind of want to spend more time devoted to helping parents bridge that gap between home and the clinic so they can see those same results.
Okay. And how do you plan on like bridging that gap, like when it comes to parent training? Because I go to parent training once a month. Like,
Mhm.
will you have like more hands on with the parents weekly, monthly? How would that, what would that look like?
Yeah, I would kind of like to do it however it suits the parents. I know obviously all kids have different needs and different severities of needs. So I think it would really just depend on the parents, but I'd like to do kind of more like presentations for groups of parents,
Okay.
one-on-one with parents, things like that.
That is really nice. And I'll be honest, I had no clue that it was a such thing as like a parenting coach in the community until maybe like 2 months ago. Um, I followed one young lady, and then I think I started following you because I was like, this seems like one in one. And so the more and more I learn about it, I'm like, I may eventually have to get more parent training. And I think it's very important for us to go more than once a month.
Absolutely.
And yeah, because
There's so
they'll
much that
tell me,
happens.
yeah, so they'll tell me, they're like, oh, Aiden did this at school or he did that. And I'm like, yeah, he won't do that at home. And I'm
Mhm.
trying the same steps, that y'all are teaching me. And I think it's important for us to kind of have that parent training. Do you see that often as a special education teacher, like the students to do things for you, but they won't do it at home?
A few times, but I'm usually in pretty quick communication with parents when I kind of notice a change. And then the parents will kind of tell me, oh no, like he does that at home, he knows how to do that. And then I'll come back to the kid and say, oh, I talked to mom, and mom says you're able to do this. Like, or we maybe just fibbing a little bit, and usually they'll kind of turn it around.
Oh, you seem like you're so patient and just like the perfect teacher for them. And we need teachers like that.
Thank you.
What is one misconception about ABA therapy that you would like to kind of disappear?
Oh, I think I've talked about this already, but I think I would just kind of want to erase the idea that ABA is about compliance or about punishing kids. I think when we like kind of refer to it as dog training or we hear that in social media, we think ABA is so bad. And I kind of did it first too before I did my research. But I think that really good ABA is about kind of like empowering and building those skills with our kiddos and just kind of forming those relationships so that their kids can go out and generalize.
And what keeps you inspired and showing up for the kids? Because, like I mentioned earlier, that can be really draining. Because I know some teacher get lit, and it requires a lot, and
It
it requires a lot of mental like. capacity for it. So what keeps you inspired to continue?
Yes, I think honestly what keeps me going is my students. I know that sounds kind of crazy because they can also, it's a lot of effort and it's a lot of patience for sure. But I think even on the hardest days, I kind of look at how far they've come in their journey. Even like their growth throughout the year, looking back was just insane. And I think it's just really a privilege to be able to work with them and kind of build that little family that we built during the school year. So just kind of seeing their growth, seeing their progress, seeing them get excited about reaching their goals makes me want to kind of continue.
Oh, I love that. I really do love that. And what is your confession as a special education teacher as well as a grad student?
Oh, this is such a good one. So I think my confession would be, so I'm a first year teacher. Well, I just finished my first year of teaching. And I think honestly, my confession would be that sometimes I feel like I still don't 100% know what I'm doing. I feel like imposter syndrome is really real for me. I can kind of get in my head a little bit, but I kind of remind myself that I'm not expected to know everything right away, just like I don't expect my kids to know everything. I'm just kind of learning, growing, just kind of showing up for them.
Thank you. And thank you for showing up for our kids. Even though it's your first year, just speaking with you, like you seem like you are an amazing teacher and your patience for our babies is next level. And I say that because a lot of times we can feel when someone is really not there for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of professionals don't understand it. It's not like we're trying to be picky, but we can kind of feel when someone isn't really like meshing with our babies or
For
things like
sure.
that.
Yeah. Even if
So
someone's genuine, it's your kiddo, it's your baby.
yeah. And that's the most important thing for me because Aiden starts school next year and I'm afraid. But speaking with you and knowing that is someone out there that's just like you, first year, totally inspired, gives me hope that he's gonna be okay and that there's someone gonna be looking out for him like you.
And he will. I know it's definitely a hard like transition, especially letting them go off to schools, letting them go off to school for the first time. But I think a lot of special ed teachers, I hope I can say this, a lot of special ed teachers go into this job because they have a connection to someone with a disability. And I think that just makes them like have such a big heart. And I think they kind of know that these kids that are coming into their classroom are, you know, someone's child, someone's grandchild, someone's cousin, someone's loved one. So I think he'll have a great experience. I think he's going to grow so much.
Thank you. And so while we're wrapping it up, I want you to tell us more, just a tad bit more about SheShapesBehaviors. Tell us where they can find you. Give them all your social media platforms and your goals again, so they can hear.
Absolutely. So if you would like to learn more, want to connect with me, you could find me on Instagram or TikTok at SheShapesBehavior. So I share tips for parents, students, and my fellow ABA professionals. You could also find me on Find Parent Advocates as well. I try to support parents on there. I do consultations for parents that have a child that's in a special education classroom. If they're looking for any advice, you could also find me on there.
Okay. And can you elaborate a little bit more on what you just spoke about doing the consults?
Yes, so it's called Find Parent Advocates, and I can send you a link as well.
Okay.
If you go click on there, you can schedule a consultation with me, and I can answer any questions you have about, you know, IEPs, BIPs, paperwork, things like that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Morgan. I really appreciate you being on. I'm gonna put all of her information below, and if you all want to speak with someone about a consult with IEPs, I will have her direct link in there, and also follow her on social media. She put out great content when it comes to special education, and she's had a few tips when it came to parent training in her working aside. So make sure you follow, and I'll put that her link in the comment section. And make sure you all leave a comment for Morgan because she will be finishing up her program in a year. So let's give her plenty of encouragement. And also send this to a family member or friend and just share it, because resources like this and what Morgan does is very important to us in the community, especially when it comes to IEPs. I'm learning that a lot of people are not completely understanding the IEP process. So if the help and resources are out there, make sure you all take full advantage of it.
I will walk you through it. I also have a stay-in store too. If you click the link in my bio, I have a store with some resources for parents too.
Perfect. Thank you again, Morgan. And we truly enjoyed you. And this is the end of this week's episode. So I will see you all next week. Bye.